Considering that Christmas is one of the holiest days of the year for Christians, and we read about it, sing about it, and talk about it more than pretty much anything else in the Christian year, we sure get a lot of it wrong. Over time, we've added more and more things to the Christmas story, to the point where the actual human events seem almost foreign to our ears. It all started when a messenger came to Mary and told her that she was going to become pregnant. She accepted this news with grace, but not with joy. See, women back then got engaged pretty much as soon as they hit puberty, so Mary was almost certainly just a little girl. And she had every reason under religious law to expect that this pregnancy could result in her death, because her family had the right to kill her for having a child out of wedlock. Best case scenario, she could expect to be divorced from her fiancé, losing her only means of financial support and being ostracized for the rest of her life. We can see this fear manifest as the Bible records that Mary fled, literally fled, to Elizabeth's house as soon as she heard the news. And it was there, with time to reflect in safety, that the praise started flowing. When Mary returned 3 months later, almost certainly starting to show at this point, her fiancé Joseph was shocked. He decided to let Mary live, but was going to divorce her until a dream convinced him to stick by her side. By doing this, in the town's eyes, he was as good as admitting that the child was his, and subjected them both to intense stigma and ridicule for the next 6 months. It's noteworthy that we never hear about Joseph and Mary's family in this story. Now, we don't know for sure, but it is very probable that they both got kicked out of their families and that they were alone, as for 6 months Mary more and more showed what the entire town took to be evidence of Joseph and Mary's sins. I can imagine Mary holding herself together, reminding herself that they had been promised that this would be a miracle birth. This was a miracle baby. And that if she could just hold out for 6 more months, everything would be okay. Then Joseph had to go to his hometown for the census, and there is no reason Mary would have gone with him if she had anywhere else to be. And so, mere days or even hours before giving birth to Jesus, Mary walked 90 miles on dirt roads, mostly uphill. My wife had trouble climbing the stairs 9 months pregnant. I can't even imagine Mary having to walk that far. Finally, arriving at Joseph's hometown, there was no place for them. In a land where hospitality was required, where you were expected to take in a stranger, and where family always had somewhere to stay, no one would take them in Joseph's ancestral hometown, surrounded by relatives. Notice that the Bible doesn't say that there was no room. It says there was no room for them. We don't know where they went from there. We know that they used a feeding trough as the baby's first crib, but nothing else. They could have found a room somewhere else finally. They could have been in a cave, in a stable. They might have just huddled up behind a building somewhere. We just don't know. But what we do know is that it was the middle of the night and they were alone. In the middle of family, no one was with them. They were shunned and outcasts. And alone with Joseph, Mary gave birth to the Son of God. No surgery, no epidurals, no drugs of any kind, no doctors, no medical staff, no family, no experience with any of this. She gave birth. Just a teenager. This was the miracle birth that they had been hoping for, that they had been counting on, and nothing happened. No magi show up yet. No star to guide Mary and Joseph. The angels didn't even appear to them, just to the shepherds, who don't show up until later. Mary was covered in blood, cold, exhausted, and alone. And Joseph is holding a baby that for 9 months has caused him and Mary nothing but trouble and has turned their entire life upside down. A baby that only a dream convinced him to stick it out with. This isn't a fairy tale. Mary and Joseph went through all of the pain, all of the scorn, all of the loneliness and doubt that any person would experience going through this. All for this birth. And in that glorious moment, nothing seems to be different for them. We can't deal with that, can we? I mean, we invent traditions so that Mary isn't in pain, so that they aren't alone, they aren't cold, they aren't afraid. We create a donkey for Mary to ride so that she doesn't have to walk. We invent midwives to be there and drummer boys to be there so that Mary doesn't have to be alone. We invent animals to worship Jesus so that someone is present at the birth and recognizing it for what it truly is. We add angels looking over them. We make the Magi show up immediately. We add so much to this story. We sing songs about how Jesus was a perfect baby who never cried and Mary had no pain in childbirth. We add halos in paintings so that it was obvious from the start that something miraculous had happened. We give them a roof, and we give them gifts, and we give them people paying attention because the real events just seem too cold, too sad, too lonely and painful for us to want to associate them with the birth of our Savior. But all that stuff is made up to make us feel better about it. This was the single most sacred moment in human history. How could it have passed by so unnoticed? The instinct is to add anything and everything that we can to the story so that Mary and Joseph are not left alone and in pain or in doubt for even a moment. But that's what they were until the shepherds arrive. And adding all of that stuff distracts us from one of the main points of Christmas. Something isn't holy or sacred because of how splashy or popular or obvious or fun it is. It's not sacred because of how many people were there or how anyone felt in the moment. Something is sacred because God is there. It is holy because God is part of it. The most mundane of events get transformed, not because of what we see, but because God was at work in it. This was a holy night. Not because it looked it, not because there was glory or trumpets, but because God had been made flesh and was with them, as he can be with us. Merry Christmas, everybody. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day. See you next video.